It might sound impossible for me to miss this, but I didn't realise that I was on my 51st episode, which would have been a really fitting time to talk about anything Area 51 related. So anyway, I'm here to make up with that with two Area 51 games. This time from 1995 and 2019. So we're going to do a little hop back to the past and then come back to the future for this one. Enjoy. One thing that I forgot to mention, or maybe played down a little more than I originally intended, was the fact that Midway made another Area 51 game back in the late 90s. Although they didn't make that one, they actually just published it. In fact, this particular game was developed by Mesa Logic and published by Atari. I believe that Midway brought the rights to it a few years back after Atari began to struggle. Wikipedia somewhat backs me on this, but goes into a little bit more detail, explaining that they were in competition with Electronic Arts. In hopes of making a profit, they made a light gun shooter to try and capitalise on the market and dominate arcades everywhere. The project head left the project, which was originally called Bounty Hunter, and little to no detailing exists about that project as far as I can tell. After that point, the game was passed on to an external team outside of Atari, who were a lot more interested in making a game about Area 51 than carrying on this base concept, which they thought was adequate at best. Anyway, this game was originally an arcade shooter, but found its way onto the home console eventually, namely the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Apparently it was on Windows as well. This is because of Atari going under in '96 and being gobbled up by YMS Industries, who are kind of like the Konami of their day, being very focused on gambling machines, though they did show a lot of interest in video games in the early to mid 2000s. I played the PS1 rendition of this game, though unlike Johnny Rock, this is an actual light gun game ported onto a home console, and not a bastardized DVD. I also couldn't help but find it funny that in 2004, someone by the name of Casino UK reviewed this game on Amazon, calling it the worst video game of all time. Yeah, it's really not. While I have played better light gun games, and better games in general, I'll say that this is at worst a bad port. The game revolves around a mission in Area 51 where a crashed alien probe is recovered and taken to a top-secret military installation located in the remote Nevada desert. Apparently the base has gone dark and you're there to liberate it from what's basically alien terrorists. They tell you this via a text dump over some stock images of the complex's exterior, with some weird-ass graphic overlays. After a few seconds it gets stamped confidential. Even though that really doesn't make it confidential, but whatever. You're apparently a member of STAR. Stars. STAAR, who I'm guessing are bootlegs of Resident Evil stars. You're accompanied by Marcus and Chesty LaRue here as you go in to counter all alien threats. I do love these annotations as well. Like, apparently the things we should be noting are Chesty LaRue's knee, her ponytail, this square area around her assault rifle, and her hand. We should also keep an eye on Marcus's gun, his knee, and, strangest of all, his hip. Your mission is to go in and activate a nuclear self-destruct system. I'm not sure if this is a suicide mission or not, but whatever. So there are two missions to do here. There's Beginning and Warp Ahead. Apparently this game has a grand total time of like 20 minutes, which isn't actually that short compared to some games on Steam and a few other arcade games. In fact, there are some games on Steam that last literally 15 seconds. So you arrive on the set of the Amazing Bulk, where this black dude drops out of the really bad CGI helicopter and starts waving. This is where the game begins, and you decide that you're going to be the Terminator today, and simply march into a war zone without cover. Your enemies are these zombie James Bond henchmen who blow up into a gory mess when you shoot them. Apparently this game was called out for a lot of its violence, and mentions the violence a lot in related media, but I found its violence to be somewhat juvenile and stupid. They just explode into a bloody mess when shooting them, which is just so lame. I never find violence being depicted as effective if it's not really being shown in a more intimate light. I guess you could say that an exploding body will never really do it for me on the same way that Ethan chopping his finger did in Heavy Rain. There's just something about less being more that's especially true to violence. I have to admit, the visuals are my favourite aspects of this game, combining the dodgy 3D backdrops of the 90s with those photomation things, like the early Mortal Kombat games. I love the way that this guy just sort of struts onto the screen. We got ourselves a real style child here. Your star companions are kind of stupid, as they keep getting in your way. This guy just stands up whilst you're trying to take a shot. Oi, down in front! And then this crazy motherfucker literally jumps in your face and you somehow still get penalised for shooting him. Isn't that just natural selection? I mean, I don't see him living a long life if he keeps jumping in front of live fire situations like an idiot. The enemies vary a bit, but kinda like Time Crisis, most of them are just the same guy recoloured several times. There's also this Captain Alex-esque helicopter that you have to shoot down with a handgun. Because of course that would work. One of the things that I noticed pretty early on was how similar the health bar was in this game as it was in Area 51 2005. A connection? Probably not. Yeah, this game actually has no connection to Area 51 2005, with the exception of an arcade cabinet that you can find in a break room in that game. One of the commenters in my last video thought it was a remake, or even a sequel, but as far as I can tell, it's much more of a spiritual successor at best. It apparently got a sequel of sorts in the form of Area 51 Site 4, but as far as I can tell that was an arcade-only game and was pretty much just more of the same. You might notice that I'm not very good at light gun games. I did manage to get to the end in Vampire Knight, and that's my biggest claim to fame as far as this genre goes. It doesn't really help that the cursor moves really slowly, and that you have to use the D-pad, which just makes it even more stiff and awkward. I tried turning on the analog sticks, which you'd think that a game like this would support that, being that it was made in '96, but it just locks the game down until you turn it back off again. It's a pretty standard affair gameplay-wise, but compared to more dynamic games in its genre on the PS2, this one feels somewhat lacking. Maybe it was better in the arcade, but the PS1 version really doesn't do that justice if it was. Unlike Area 51 2005, it has little by way of atmosphere, substance, or even a story to keep me hooked, and its design is vastly inferior. It'd be nice if Marcus and Chesty LaRue did more than just get in the way. I mean, you can look at their bios and they're actually accomplished soldiers with nearly 10 years worth of experience. But all I can see Chesty LaRue doing is just getting scared and sitting in front of a truck. It's almost like they both lied on their application form to look more impressive than they actually are. A lot of people were quite nostalgic for this game, and I can see why, since it's definitely unique in its visuals. I actually kind of like the crummy CGI and the weirdness of it all, especially the aliens who remind me of the shock troopers from Half-Life Opposing Force. Almost everyone that I know of a certain age bracket remembers this thing semi-fondly, and that's kind of lost on me. It's not bad enough for me to get offended, but it's not good enough for me to recommend based on my experience. Now the sequel, on the other hand, I did try to get some footage of that game and even make this a 3-in-1 review instead of the original planned 2-in-1. However, this game was never ported onto home consoles or PC, and currently only exists as an arcade cabinet. Not only would it cost me around $2,000 to own this game as an arcade cabinet, but yeah, I don't really have space to burn at this point, so I did get an emulator so that I could play this thing. From what I can tell though, nobody has gotten it to work even on the emulator as of yet. I don't think anyone's interested enough in making it work, especially given that it's basically the same thing as Area 51 95. I mean, I looked it up, and the last time anyone even inquired about it was in, like, 2009 anyway. I did get the intro cinematic to work. Admittedly, the audio is fucked up, and it sounds horrible, but aside from that, the rest of the game is completely unplayable. Maybe someday, if I'm stupidly rich enough to buy the arcade cabinet, I might be able to show it. But for now, we're going to have to put this game on ice and maybe come back to it another time. For now, though, we have 2019's Area 51.
There it is. Area 51, where they keep the aliens. We're all gonna climb over that fence and rush them. They can't stop us all.
So this one is based on the Area 51 raid of 2009 that kinda, sorta, didn't really happen. As a result, this is a short-lived joke meme game on Steam. I figured it was worth covering this in the same video as the 95 game, as neither of them felt like they had enough substance for a whole episode. I actually brought this hoping that it would be some sort of goof in my original Area 51 video, but sadly it didn't fit, so it never really happened. I know, some true comedy was lost there. So, for a shitty meme game, it's not so bad. It has a consistent style to it, and it at least functions as it intends to. Yeah, it's kind of sad that this is what constitutes as praise when we go into this territory of games, but, well, at least it's not as much of a nightmare as some of the other meme games that I've been exposed to. That, and it wasn't anti-Semitic either. You basically run around and rescue aliens, trying not to get shot. Except you're destined to die given that you have rocks and they have assault rifles. You also can't control anyone but yourself, so there's no strategy on that front. After a bit you die and the game adds up your score, and then puts it towards the unlockables. It's cool that the game has unlockables and a progression system, but there aren't any real incentives to go for any of them. I got as far as to unlock the rock thrower class, but it doesn't really improve the game in any meaningful way. The 4 classes available are Naruto runners, rock throwers, Kyles, and Londoners. I only really got the joke of the first 2. Anyway, most of this game is just avoiding enemies as best you can, until you inevitably get backed into a corner and gunned down. A high score is possible, but this isn't really the kind of game I could personally invest that kind of time or effort into. The sound design is its weakest aspect by far. It's got some very low quality voice files and some distinctively bad voice acting scattered throughout the game. I mean, it's better than the text-to-speech crap that I've found in games like Unknown City, and I've definitely seen worse voice acting even when it is provided, but that doesn't make this necessarily good. The UFO makes this horrible door creaking sound that's really distracting. It sounds awful, and it took me a while to figure out what it even was. A lot of the voices and sound effects are quiet, while the item pickups are comparatively loud. It could really do with some work. On my first attempt, I ended up punching the alien a few times, thinking that he needed to die for some reason. I guess I'm just a big fucking racist. Let's just hope that Marilyn Manson doesn't hold it against me. You have little to no defense against damage in this game, so you go down incredibly quickly. I get the feeling that this is deliberate, because it's true to life. The game doesn't seem to be very optimistic about the Raiders' chances. From what I can tell, I did a much better job of killing my own team than the enemies. Maybe I could get a better paying job working for the army. I mean, I don't really care about the raid or the people in it, so might as well turn on the Freedom Force. You can also call in airstrikes and UFOs to bomb the place, which is kinda cool, I guess. Like most games in its genre, this thing quickly loses its charm. Personally, I think it might have been better as an RTS. Kind of like Warcraft or Fairy Tales or something. My theory was validated when I discovered this sandbox mode, which isn't so much of an RTS as it is one of those ultimate battle-esque games. It actually is a lot more fun to make a bunch of formations and see if any of them work. Though then again, it does get old real quick. Treating this like a badly run military campaign would be a bit funnier, and it would also be a bit more realistic to the actual joke. However, due to the time constraints that they had on making this game, I don't think they had the time, effort, or patience to do such a thing. And even if they did, we're kind of past the deadline for the raid. Maybe this game could continue to be updated, but I highly doubt that it will. It'll likely fall into obscurity with shit like Fidget Spinner Simulator. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a certainty. I would love it if they prove me wrong somehow. I just don't see this game having much support from this point onwards. Hell, my video on it could be the last reference made to it for years to come. Possibly forever. Which is pretty goddamn sad, really. So despite its many flaws, the 2005 game definitely holds up for me as the best of the Area 51 games. Although, despite it not being very attractive to newcomers like me, the 95 one does hold a lot of nostalgic weight with the people who enjoyed it when it was back in its heyday. I have to say though, I'm not so sure the same will be said about the 2019 one. Well, I guess that's it for this Area 51 gravy train. Join me again in 10 years when we do this again, I guess. Actually, you know what, fuck it, I don't plan on living that long. I like how they have to put that on there. Don't shoot your own people.